Chukas. Today we're going to talk about Chukas, and there's a similar theme that we can see through this parasha. The parasha begins, Zois Chukas HaTorah, and we learn about the Parah Aduma. There's a person becomes Tomei Meis, the strongest tumah that there is, the Avi Avois HaTumah. And the only way that they can become tahar, they can become pure, is by having the ashes of a para aduma that is prepared in a very specific way, sprinkled on them on the third and the seventh day. And the fascinating underlying complexity of the para aduma that makes it a chok of this mitzvah of the red cow, that makes it an impossible to understand mitzvah, is that it is metame tohorim and metayeh tmeim. It has the exact opposite effect of what it's supposed to do, what you'd think it would do. The one who prepares it is an asaf ish kohen, a tahor, kohen who's tahor, and he becomes tomei. And these ashes, when they're sprinkled on a person who's tomei, he becomes tahor. So it's a paradox. It's something which is impossible really to understand. Shlomo HaMelech said, Amati echkama, I thought I was wise. V'hi rechoika mimeni, and it is distant from me. This is a mitzvah that I cannot understand. Zois chukas haTorah. This is the chok, the underlying chok of the Torah. My Rabbi, the Nesiv Shalom, explains it a little bit, as do many other Sfarim, all in the same vein. A little bit of a different way of explaining it, but there's a very strong underlying theme that is the essence of the Torah, and it defines our relationship with Hashem. We have to first understand, why is it that a person, a dead person, a carcass, a person who's dead, just there's a gevir, there's a body, but there's no soul, contracts immediately, instantly upon death, such a strong form of tumah. Until today, it has relevance. A kohen who's not allowed to be metame himself, even though he's already tomei, but he's not allowed to be metame himself, can't be in a room, can't be in a building with a person with a dead body, because there's a tumas maga, touching, masa, lifting, and oyel. Anything that is under the roof of the dead body will contract its impurity. He has to go out of the hospital. He has to go out of the house, or wherever there is the dead person. He can't go into a beis hakvaros, can't go into a graveyard. He's a kohen. How do we understand this? And the Sfarim explain that while a person is alive, we have a neshama, we have a chelik elokai mimal. And once that neshama disappears, there's a heder hatuma, there's a heder hakdusha. The kedusha has disappeared, and all we are left with is a body without any makor, without any chiyus of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, without any life of the soul. It's just a body, and therefore the forces of impurity are now attracted to it. It's not that the body itself is impure. The body becomes a vessel for a ruach, a spirit of impurity that rests upon that body. In place, in lieu of the Kedusha, whenever there is a void, a vacuum, when Kedusha goes away, Tumah will take its place. And the Sfarim explain this a little bit deeper, so we should understand this. It's not that it's not that the body itself, of course the body, as far as we're concerned, is tomei. Anybody who touches the body is tomei. But we see clearly, it's not the actual physical body, it's the heder, it's the fact that the kedusha, that the neshama is now removed, and in its place there's a ruach of tumah, a spirit of tumah, that anyone who's under the roof is tomei. It's not the body itself, not just touching the body that makes you contract the impurity. Anything that's in that room is going to become tomei. It spreads. It's a tumas oil, because the body is now the vessel, has now become the kli, so to speak, for this ruach of tumah. The Sfarim explains something very deep. Purity and impurity has everything to do with holiness and the lack thereof. Gaiva, considering oneself as something important, as someone important, is the source of impurity. And humility is the source of purity. If we look at the way that this para aduma was prepared and sprinkled, it says, V'lokach, the Rashi tells us that you have to take, the Pasuk says, V'lokach HaKohen, and the Kohen takes 8 eres, he takes a cedar wood, the Ezov, that's a very, very tall tree, the Ezov, and he takes a lowly hyssop, a very low herbal growth, Ushni Selas, and he takes a Shni Selas, a little piece of thread that's dyed with very red dye, crimson. Telas is a worm, and he takes these 3 and he throws them into the cow that is burning the ashes that are being prepared. And Rashi says, why are these 3 taken? And Rashi tells us, because these 3 reflect and represent everything that we're trying to accomplish. An Ezov is someone who's very tall. Impurity comes about when someone thinks that they are a somebody. They're strutting about thinking they're somebody. Because the more that one recognizes that everything flows from Hashem, and I'm not really anything. My energy, my life is flowing from Hashem. V'nachnu ma, who am I? What am I? Everything is the Rebbeinu Shalom. The more I realize and recognize that, the more I'm connected to the Makor of Kedusha to Hashem Yisbarach. And the more that I think I am something and I am somebody and I deserve and I need, the more I'm an Erez, the more I stand up tall, the less ability I have, the more distant I am from Hashem. Toyavas Hashem kol gvalev. The greatest toyeva, the greatest abomination, the most repulsive, the most distant thing from Hashem is the gvalev, the one who thinks that he's a somebody. I'm something. I am. Once we emphasize the body, the I, we're distant from the source. And if we think about everything of Torah and mitzvahs and our whole purpose in life, in this world, it can be summed up in these 2 words. Bittul hayeshus. Bittul hayeshus. Bittul means annulling. Hayeshus, the yesh, the I, the somebody, the something. It looks like a yesh. We have to make from that yesh a shai, a present to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Pasuk, the Mishnah tells us, Osid HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give lahanchil, is going to automatically, it will come to all the tzaddikim that were mevatel their yesh in this world. They're going to get shai olamis, 310 worlds. Because when we give ourselves, we give our yesh as a shai, as a gift to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we're connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu intimately. And we have this constant struggle. Since a little child is born, his first natural instinct is to assert himself. Don't tell me what to do! Reverse psychology. You want a child to do something, you tell them just the opposite. It's ingrained and embedded, and it reflects our body, our I. And the only way that we can connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is by suspending the I and being one with Him. V'ro, the Pasuk talks about the end of time. V'ro kol boso yachtov, ki pi Hashem diber. That the end of time, everybody will see kol bosa, all the people that think, the kol b'nei bosa that will be yikru b'shmecha at the end of time, all those big b'nei bosa, bosa, I'm a somebody, I'm something. Look at me. Bosa doesn't just mean flesh. My Rolex watch is part of my flesh. My nice, fine Italian suit is part of my flesh. That's very external accoutrements. Don't start up with me. It's part of my flesh. Everybody will see. Ki pi Hashem diber. There's a pi Hashem. Ki al kol moitzi pi Hashem yichye ha'adam. There's a chelik of neshama that is the source, the makor of chiyus for everything in this world. And the more we not simply pay it lip service and not simply acknowledge it, but we live it. And we live it by surrendering the ego and surrendering the self, the more we're connected to Hashem. The Yetzer Hara, the force of evil, the body is called the Sitra Achra, the other side. He's on the Sitra Achra, he's the other side. And his whole chiyus, his life comes from strutting around, from thinking, I am somebody. Ani, ve'afsi, oid, I'm somebody, I'm something. Pari, who's the source of impurity. We came out of Egypt in order to surrender and connect to Hashem. Pari is the source of evil. He represents the sea, the 49th level of Tumah. And the Midrash tells us, well, you know what Pari said? Li Yo'ori, the river Nile is mine. The source of all plenty and bounty is mine. The whole stock market is mine. I'm the king. Ani Osisi, I made it. And therefore I can do whatever I want. Nobody will tell me what to do. I am parua. I'm open to everything and anything. Don't tell me what to do. Something is resonating. It's our society. It has the guise of sensitivity, free rights, democracy, human rights, but at its source, it's ani yo'ori veli asisiv. Real humility, genuine recognizing everything flows from Hashem is an entirely different world. And if we think about it, what Shlomo HaMelech was saying, Omati echkama, I thought I was wise, v'hi rechoikim mimeni, and the chak of para is distant from me, sums it all up. Omati echkama, I thought echkama, I've become wise. That is what makes v'hi rechoika mimeni. It is distant from me. It is distant from me. You know, yesterday we talked a little bit about this deeper and how really to connect to someone else, we have to be mevatel our seichel. We have to be willing to hear them out. We'll talk a little more about it. In order for us to connect to Hashem, to connect to our source, to live with Kedusha, to live with oneness, to live with purity, we're living with the Ma. We're surrendering. That's why the form of purity has to come through going into a mikvah, through surrendering one's life's source, through bittul hayeshus. I'm so fond of saying over the words. We have to say it over and over and over. My Rabbi used to say it over all the time in the Siva Shalom, the words of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. I think it was also Rabbi Michal of Zlotchev who writes this. Some say it's attributed to the Baal Shem Tov. I'll come to you in a second, Chaim, but the words of the Pasuk are...
Shriti Hashem?
No. Anoichi oimeid bein Hashem o beinechem, the Baal Shem Tov said. Anoichi, it's the I that stands between Hashem and you. Moshe Rabbeinu is recalling the events of Sinai in Vaitzchan, and he's telling the Jewish people, do you recall what took place? I stood between you and God, and I gave you over the Luchos, I gave you over the 10 Commandments. And he said, Anoichi is the I that stands between Hashem and you. The ego, the I, is really the source, the insulating material that distances us from our divine source. And the more we are able to melt the I, and how do we melt the I? Yeah, there are acts that we do to subdue and weaken, and we have to stand up with gevura. But it's recognizing internally that who I am at the source is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's the one who gives me life. He's the one who gives me chiyus. He's the one who's the source of my existence. He defines me. That, and living it for real, is what it's all about. And it starts with Zois Chukas HaTorah, with surrendering the Seichel. Because the Seichel, at the very, very source, is the I. It's the mind that sends the impulses and messages to the entire body. This is the command and control. And if I'm capable of surrendering my mind, my control center to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm giving him over the keys. It's not about me. I'm just here to do your will. And do you know when we know we've really given over the keys? When it flies in the face of all our seichel and our mind, and we're not defensive in any which way whatsoever. We're just there to do your will. Even though it's totally, every sense inside of us says the opposite. We'll explain this. We'll see if we could give it a little bit more practical application. But Chaim, you wanted to ask something.
Yeah. I'm not saying against Bittul Yesh, but like, is it possible that we're giving up our free will when we do Bittul Yesh? Is there still free will? Because you're Bittul, you're Yesh, so where's the Bechira?
It's such a good question. That is the Nekudas HaBechira. The Nekudas HaBechira is that am I going to assert myself and do what I, according to my seichel, think is right? Or am I going to, yesterday we were talking about following the rabbis, al yamin shu smol, al smol shu yamin, whether the right is the left or the left is the right. Am I going to surrender my seichel and follow what they say? And there lies, herein lies my bechira, my free choice. Am I going to follow my body, my mind, what I think is rational, the way I think it should be? Or am I going to surrender my mind and implicitly follow what is right, even though my mind says maybe it's not right, it doesn't flow from my interests, but I'm going to follow what they say is right?
That is the choice.
Suspending the seichel is the choice.
Yeah, it is the choice.
That is the choice. That's where my free choice lies, every time. We'll talk about it. No, we always go back to this. There are three essential areas where in the human world, within ourselves, the three pillars of our existence, if you will, lie. One is our relationship to self. One is our relationship to Hashem. And one is our relationship to one another, to our fellow Jew. And those three are the Amudei Ha'olam. You know, oftentimes I see people struggling, fighting, misunderstanding one another, misinterpreting. We're entrenched in a certain mindset. We interpret when people talk to us about the way we're thinking that they're saying it and what they're saying and what they're trying to get from us and how they're trying to manipulate us. And we're answering back and we're embroiled in a conflict. And the key, really, is to find shalom, to be able to listen to someone else. It's one of the hardest things imaginable. It's one of the greatest exercises in restraint and self-control. To be a good listener. To be a good listener. Now, I can be a good listener to someone who's fascinating. Someone who's sharing good stuff with me, someone who's saying interesting shir, and the stuff is really inspiring, and I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, and the stories are just getting me really spiked. I can be a good listener. But what about being a good listener to someone who's telling me off, who's raking me over the coals, and telling me, like, what did you do? Why did you do this? My blood is boiling. What do you mean why I did this? Don't you realize I did it for XYZ? Why are you saying that to me? And I'm listening. I hear you. You're right. I hear where you're coming from. I'm trying to understand. I want to understand your perspective. What you're saying is this, that, and the other. Is that correct? Wow. That only comes, that ability only comes to suspend my seichel and listen to the other person when I have it with Hashem. when I am anchored inside of me to the Rabbanu Shalom. You see, inside of us, we want to rationalize our existence. We can't listen to other people because inside of us we have to defend ourselves. We're always busy defending ourselves. We automatically, in the face of any criticism, we automatically want to put up a fight. We don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be controlled. We don't want to feel that we're being manipulated. We want to be free. We want to be understood. We want to be appreciated. The more that I am centered inside of me, secure inside of me, anchored inside of me. How am I anchored? How can I listen to criticism? Automatically, all my bodily reflexes want to assert, I need to be understood. I'm not going to be rolled over. I'm not going to be a blanket. I'm not going to be a carpet. I'm not going to be a doormat. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not chopped liver. Those are all the natural instincts of our body. It will only come when we are anchored to something much more real. To HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He's the source of our chiyus. This is who I am. At my essence and at my source. I don't need other people's validation. It may be that my body, you're right, I'm open to it. I want to hear all the warts in my body and all the foibles. I'm ready to hear. Even though I might disagree, I want to be able to hear where you're coming from and allow myself to be subjected to criticism. I'll only be able to do it without flying off the handle and without answering back, and without, even if I'm not answering back, trying to contain all that volcanic activity that wants to blurt out and answer back, which again won't allow the other person to feel listened to, won't realize the true objective. I'll only be able to really hear the other person when I don't have to answer back, because I'm anchored. My existence has the stamp of approval. It doesn't need to be approved because I'm right, because I did what was right. I don't have to defend myself. I am who I am because I am. Because Hashem wills me to be. Because I'm good at the source. And that's who I am. It's not an easy concept to absorb. But we have to go over this. This is bread and butter of real life. Bread and butter of good relationships. As long as we haven't internalized that and we're asserting ourselves, we're connected to the Sitra Achra, we're connected to the body, we're connected to our pride. We need to preserve our ego. We can't really connect to another neshama, and we certainly can't connect to Hashem. So what do you want me to be? A shmata? No! V'nechnu ma. Moshe Rabbeinu realized the greatest level of humility and thereby the greatest connection of Hashem, because he realized I'm just a reflection of Hashem. He didn't just realize it in his mind. You know, we can all talk about it and pontificate about it, but the distance from here to here is so much further than from heaven to earth. We have to bring it down. We have to live it. And we only live it by doing the actions, by internalizing the concepts, by thinking about them constantly, by as our mind constantly goes astray and we get all wrapped up in our hurt feelings and our need to be heard and to be understood, we learn to say, I'm going to get this and put this aside. I want to be real. I know that you, Hashem, are my existence. You are the source of my existence. You are who I am. I don't need to be validated. You're validating me. Let me hear the other person. And you know what? When we listen to the other person, it's a reality. The other person starts to listen to us. Starts to understand us. After we've genuinely listened to the other person will say, oh, I was understood. Now I can connect. All their resistance is removed, and their soul can start to connect and understand. I think the Torah tells us, Nosen Titein, you should surely give the poor person. It's a double. You're supposed to give twice. You put your hand in the pocket, you gave $1 to the poor guy. Now put your hand in your pocket and give again. Nosen Titein. You should surely give. That's the premise. Nosen Titein. Give double. We're only obligated to give Meiser 10%. But a good Jew gives 20%. I'm not used with the 10%. I'm giving another 10%. Why am I giving 20%? Why am I giving the other 10%? The other 10% is so much more valuable than the first 10%. The first 10% is assuaging my feelings. It's making me feel, I did it, what I was supposed to do. The second 10% is the real deal. I don't have to do it anymore. But now I'm doing it because I want to do it. Because I'm there for you, not for me. See, we do mitzvahs. And deep down, much of what we do, not to minimize the value of it, but deep down, it has a lot to do with ourselves. We have a mezuzah on the door. I go down around Manhattan, and there's so many offices and businesses. You go around the garment district, and they all have a mezuzah on the door, and you look in the people, not particularly religious, but it's a good luck charm. There was a lady that drove me around there. We had a student who came from Beverly Hills, and the mother was a real estate broker. And I went there to Beverly Hills on behalf of the yeshiva. I went to California, a very nice family, and the lady said, Rabbi, I have to show you Beverly Hills. This is just so beautiful. She knew all the prime locations she was trying to sell and buy and so on. She knows everywhere. She drives me around Beverly Hills. She shows me all the gated communities from the top of the ridge there. You can see all the rolling estates. I think all these unhappy people living in these mansions. Oh, what a Sodom V'Amora, what again is down there. What an illusion, what an optical illusion, what a mirage. But it was fascinating to me that almost every house had a mezuzah on. There were so many houses with mezuzah. Wow. I said, wow, these people are all religious. They're not religious, but a mezuzah is a good luck charm. Okay. Now, obviously, when we put up a mezuzah, we want to, chsavtum al mezuzah is beisecha v'shrecha, but deep down, there's something in it, okay, we're going to be protected. Check the mezuzahs. If there's anything wrong in the house, check the mezuzahs. We need that extra protection. And it's the same with anything and everything. A lot of what we do is social peer pressure. If we really, really, I see myself, when I'm davening with a minyan in shul, my davening is entirely different than when I daven at home. If I have to daven at home for whatever reason, and I daven, hey, my Shemona Esrei isn't so long anymore. And it doesn't have the same oomph, the davening. It doesn't have the same energy. Okay, I'm human. We're all human. And we all need that little stimulus from other people around. It's not all that we're trying to make impressions on other people and we're, God forbid, we're just a sham. No, we're not. But, there's a certain energy and, everybody lifting us up. But we have to at least acknowledge and recognize how much is not yet real. We want to be real. We want to be where no one is there. Absolutely no one. No one's ever going to know. But this reflects me. Because I am you and I just want to do your will. My seichel doesn't intervene. The I doesn't infect in any way the action. The action is pure. The action is for you. And it's only for you when there's no seichel. The minute that there's seichel is invested, it's my seichel, it's my mind. We're all tuned into one radio station. WIFM. You know that station on the dial? No? WIFM? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? That's the station that we're all just automatically tuned to. Our mind, our brain. Because the brain has that physical element and component. It's just the shell to the neshama, and to penetrate to the neshama, that the neshama should control the brain, is where it really all begins. The v'nachnu ma for the neshama to control the brain means that I'm surrendering my seichel. It's the hardest thing. Wow. I have a Rebbe in Yerushalayim, and some of the things that he asks of his Hasidim, where he says, in my great wisdom, I think, whoa, that sounds so extreme. Is it so practical? Maybe we're making people do things that isn't so natural or healthy. That's my own resistance. Now, I'm human. We naturally have an element of resistance to authority, and just like little kids run away from their tati and mommy, we run away. But we have to at least acknowledge, I'm running away like a little baby, but I want to be a real person. I want to be able to surrender my seichel totally and completely and be one with you, with total tmimus. Because then when I'm connected to you, I'm connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the source of Tahara. Tumah, impurity, is the body that at its essence asserts itself. It needs, it wants. The more that we do to overcome that in action, that we can control our impulses and our desires, and that's indeed. In speech, and at the very source, in thought, the more we're connected to the source, the more we're tahor, the more we're pure, the more we're real. And if we let even our thoughts run away, it's an interesting thing, This week's parsha we read about the death of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, the greatest of the Jewish people. It's a sad parsha. All three die. Miriam dies, and then immediately after Miriam dies, we have the chet of the Mei Meriva, where Moshe and Aaron are told that they're going to die because Yan lo hemantim bilak disheni, and then Aaron actually dies. And Moshe Rabbeinu, now there's a tzav, there's a command on him, there's a gzeira on him that he's going to die. What a sad parsha. Aaron is nifta, and he's buried in Hor HaHar. So interesting how the Torah says, take him up to the Hor HaHar, the mountain on top of the mountain, the Hor HaHar. Like, why is the geographic location relevant to us? We don't make a shrine of Aaron or of Moshe Rabbeinu's burial place. Certainly don't know where Miriam was buried. But why is this relevant to us, where he was buried? The Sforim say on a deeper level, Hor HaHar, the top of the top, the tip of the mountain is Hirhor, is the thoughts. Aaron left this world, he'd conquered the thoughts, the command and control. He had no questions on Hashem. Hashem, you want me to die? No problem. Whatever you want. He walks up the mountain. There's total equanimity. He takes off his clothes, puts them on Elazar. There's a gevia. He's slipping. When Moshe Rabbeinu sees the way he passes out from this world, he says, wow. And Hashem says to him, Moshe, you're going to die in the same way. You realize the same level. There's no resistance. There's nothing he's holding on to. There's no I. Because the very source of the thought process flowed. was surrendered and had become integrated in Hashem. Everything first was, what does Hashem want? Not what does I want. What does Hashem want? I'm going to tell Hashem what he wants because I know what I want. That's the way we normally think. And we rationalize and we equivocate. We come up with all kinds of ways of thinking to get what we want, to think that we're doing what's right. Because the Yetzer Hara is sholet on our seichel. And our objective, our top of the mountain, our peak, our end destination, if you will, our design, it's a life journey to get there, is to control the thought process, to surrender the seichel. Zois chukas haTorah. Zois chukas haTorah. Miriam gave water and life sustenance to the Jewish people. Why? Because she was able to surrender herself. She didn't question. She's in Egypt. And they're throwing little babies into the River Nile. And everything looks so bleak and dark and impossible to understand. She says, we don't ask God any questions. We just do what we're supposed to do. She reunites her parents. She lives in a zone of bittul, just like water conforms to any vessel. Water is viscous. It's the most viscous. There's no I, no identity. And that's why she's the source of song. Because when we're one with Hashem, we're connected to the source of life. It's light. It's exciting. We're happy. Because we're soymech on Him. That's the source of simcha. She leads the Jewish women in song. She's singing. Her name is Puah. She's singing to the little children when they're born. In Auschwitz. In Egypt. It's mind-blowing. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam reflect the concept of Chukas HaTorah. And when they leave this world, they don't leave this world, they left a legacy. V'nechnu ma. V'nechnu ma. Gdoilim tzadikim b'misoson yoser mibachayehem. Tzadikim are greater when they die than when they're alive. And the reason, perhaps, is when someone is alive, you are misnaged to their authority. Automatically, there's a resistance. The world makes a joke, and they say the two sidras that are close, one after the other, Achrei Mois, after the death of Aaron, and then there's Pashas Kedoshim. Kedoshim to you, you should be holy. And they say, after the person died, then all of a sudden, oh, he was holy. Achrei Mois Kedoshim. Because when a person's alive, it's very hard to see their qualities, very hard to acknowledge their greatness, because subtly, subconsciously, they represent an element of threat to me. If I acknowledge them, then subconsciously something is being taken away from me. Once I have no negias, I can see them totally objectively. They're very great, they're very holy. And even the greatest tzaddikim are like that. And so when they die, they become even greater. Their legacy now can be absorbed for what it really is. We can appreciate them for who they really are. Now we can take their teachings, because that's who they really are. That's what they represent. I see it with my Rabbi, in Sivas Shalom. When he was alive, I was always afraid to go into him. I was worried, maybe he's reading my forehead. Maybe he's thinking, I'm this, that, and the other. There's always, as much as I loved him and as much as I tried to surrender myself to him, but there's always an element of, what's he thinking of me? A little bit, subconsciously, subtly. Once he passes on, it's a living legacy. It's a different world. We're human beings. We acknowledge our frailties, but we strive for the top of the mountain. We're going to surrender. Not throwing up the white flag, but lovingly submit ourselves to the source of all truth, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're going to submit ourselves from the very, very source. True connectivity, true purity. We'll be one with Hashem. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Good Shabbos, Udi.